Hi everyone, welcome to TouchChat versus LAMP. In this webinar, I'm going to be showing you the similarities and differences between the two different communication apps, why we choose one over another, some advantages, disadvantages of each of them. We'll talk a little bit about funding and implementation, and then finally a little bit about Chat Editor and ways that can also help support your students. So let's start off with the presentation. So we're going to start off with the similarities. Now, both TouchChat and LAMP are on the iOS system, which means they do not work on Androids. The reason being, the device companies feel that the Android market is far too vast in terms of types of devices, and they can't guarantee that their app will work on every single type of Android out there, whether it's Google or Samsung, all the different devices out there. But when they know an Apple device is going to be consistent, so that's the only device you can have these apps on. They're actually owned by the same parent company, PRC Saltillo. PRC is a publicly run company. They used to be separate from Saltillo. They slowly started merging, and at the beginning of this year, they're completely merged now. So when you go on their website, it'll just be the PRC Saltillo, and both apps and their also funded devices are available there. They also have other materials for implementation and training available that are free of charge. The programming functions are exactly the same between TouchChat and LAMP, because again, the iOS system kind of dictates how the programming is set up. So when we get into that, we'll show you exactly how both of those are the same in terms of adding buttons, changing features are going to be very, very similar for both devices. AirDrop is available for both of these apps so that you can share vocabulary pages. So if you have two different devices and they both have the same app on it, so they both have LAMP or they both have TouchChat, you can share vocabularies back and forth via AirDrop without needing to use the Wi-Fi. They both have opportunities for very large page sets on vocabulary. They both have WordFind, which is a system so that you can find a word that's in somewhere in the app and how to get there. The important thing with this also, it lets you know if a word is not in the system. So that way you're not killing yourself trying to find a word. They both have dwell and release time sets, which means you can set a delay on the button so they have to hold the button longer before it activates. This can help prevent some of our students who like to stim on buttons, but by repeating it really, really quickly, it'll slow them down a little bit. They both have support for grammar. They do it a little bit different ways, but there are definitely some ways to support students' grammar. They both have about the same price point, which is around $300. It's also important to know that they do have a sale twice a year, usually in October and April, one for AAC Awareness Month and one for Autism Awareness Month. And the price drops by half, which is, a big deal for a lot of us. And they're both compatible with Chat Editor. Now, talking about the differences. TouchChat has a lot of variety of page sets. You have a 4-button one called Basic 4. They have MyCore, Spelling One, Vocab PC, one for specifically people with aphasia, Multi-Chat 15, which a lot of our students will utilize, My Quick Chat, and then the Word Power, which again, a lot of our students will utilize, especially because it has that nice grammar component to it. And it comes in 20 buttons a page, 25, 42, 48, 60, 80, 108, and 140. Now, in contrast, LAMP has only one page set. It's 84 buttons on a screen. They do have 3 varieties of that 84 button page. One is called the One Touch, where you touch it once and it speaks. Transition, where you touch it once, it goes to one page and then speaks. And then Full, which has full navigation qualities to it. TouchChat can have the same image on multiple pages. You might have the word dog on the pets page, but then you may also have it on a page about brown bear or maybe another one about mammals. So you can have it on lots of different locations. In LAMP, in contrast, one word is one location. They want to keep the motor planning very consistent, so that you're basically teaching them how to get to that word, and as opposed to creating new pages to have vocabulary on. Button size can be modified in TouchChat, which means you can have a button that's 1 inch by 1 inch, and then another page will have a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, depending on what the student needs. So you may have a page that's just one big button of like yes and no, and then other pages that may have 31 buttons because you want to have the days of the week or the days of the calendar on there. So you have that modification, you have a lot of flexibility. With LAMP, button size cannot be modified. So if you have a student that cannot accurately touch a button that small, then it may not be the correct app for them. TouchChat has hide mode, which can be done whole pages. So if you pull the page maybe the main page of it, you could go into hide mode and everything you touch can get grayed out very quickly. So you can kind of limit what they have access to as you're training the words. Now with LAMP, they do not have hide mode in a broad sense. They do have it for individual images or in something called Vocab Builder. Vocab Builder is a special feature in LAMP that allows you to make a specific vocabulary list of words you want to target. So even if you just want to target the words stop and go, you set that up in Vocab Builder and run it, and everything else in the entire app is hidden except for those two target words. You may want several words. Maybe you want all the words that you would use during morning meeting, like calendar and weather. Just those words would be targeted when you run the Vocab Builder, and Vocab Builder will save all of your lists. So you may come up with 10 different lists depending on the situation, and then they will have access to those words during that particular time. TouchChat does not have Vocab Builder. The images in TouchChat are very intuitive and very easy to understand. That means like I could wipe out all the text in TouchChat and only have the images, and I could pretty much navigate anywhere I need to go and I would be able to find whatever word because the pictures are very easy to understand. In contrast with LAMP, they use a different page set of pictures that are just a little more unusual, not what we're used to seeing. So it does take a little while to get used to what the images mean. But in their mindset, LAMP is all about motor planning. They're about teaching the pathway to a word, so the picture is not as important. With TouchChat, you can have, it may take several pages to navigate to a desired word, particularly if you use a page set with very few buttons on a page. So if there's only 4 buttons on a page, then you really only have access to 3 buttons, and then you need another button to navigate to more or to the next, to the next. So it can be a little more cumbersome for some students to keep navigating to try to find the word they need. In LAMP, all words within the system can be accessed within 3 touches or less. The downside to that also, though, is once you hit the word you're looking for, it does bounce back to the home page again. So everything kind of springboards off that main page. So if you're doing 1 or 2 words or a short phrase, it's very, very quick. But when you start trying to build like a very long, complicated sentence, it may get a little bit more cumbersome because you're constantly going back to the home page. In TouchChat, you can design very specific pages for specific lessons. So for example, like Brown Bear, if you want a page just with all the vocabulary you need for Brown Bear, you can construct that page for you. So that way you have access to all the words without needing to do any navigation. In LAMP, they're really not about constructing individual pages. The words in there are really the words they want you to keep in the locations they are. You can definitely add words to it to be more specific and tailored to the student, but they really want to focus on those core words that they're going to use over and over again in lots of situations, as opposed to very specific situations, such as in what we call fringe words that they don't use as common. In TouchChat, they use symbol sticks images, which is the same images they use in unique learning systems. So if you have a student that utilizes ULS as part of their curriculum, that's a nice flow between their device and what they're doing in class. In LAMP, they use something called MindSpeak images. Again, they're very unusual, not as intuitive, but for them, the images are not important. In TouchChat, you have a light version, which can be purchased for $10. The difference is it has no voice output. Why would you want voice output? For a lot of our students, particularly those on the spectrum, that are very verbal, but they need that visual support to help guide their language, that can be a nice alternative for them. So that gives them that visual support without us prompting it, and then they can use their own voice to speak. In LAMP, there is no light version. In TouchChat, it's available both on the iPhone and the iPad. That's been really helpful for me, particularly. I can have TouchChat on my phone, and then I can airdrop students' vocabulary into my phone. So if they ever delete their app, I could always at least put the vocabulary back on when the app is restored. In LAMP, it only comes in the iPad version. Probably most likely because of the size of the images, it would be really hard to see 84 buttons on a screen on an iPhone. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about TouchChat. So I'm going to stop sharing the presentation just for a moment, and I'm going to show you my iPad itself. So that way we can look exactly how things work with TouchChat. Okay, so hopefully you're all seeing my iPad. I have TouchChat open right now. It's set to Word Power 60. But we're going to go and talk about some of the features we have here. So for example, in the upper corner, you'll see vocab and the other corner you'll see menu. These will be your two access points to doing things outside of the app. So the first one under vocab, you can choose vocabulary. So you're going to notice that there's some locks on them. So the lock that is yellow are the original vocabularies. That means you can't edit them. That way there's always an original version of all the different page sets in the system. Then you'll see an unlocked green lock. Those are ones that are copied vocabularies that allow you to edit those. So anything that's in the original can be made a copy of, so that way you have it to work with your students. So if you want to copy one, you just go to the menu, copy a vocabulary, choose which vocabulary you want to copy. Now, I always suggest when you copy a vocabulary to add the type of vocabulary it is. So in this case, this was a word power 60. And then if you want to put the student's name, you can do that as well. Just because a lot of times we may trial different vocabularies with a student, trying to find the one that's best for them. So that way you're not getting confused over which one is which, if you always keep the original kind of marked in there. So to show you again some of the basics, and when you have that basic four, again, it's very simple, real big buttons. But like I said, when it comes to having to navigate to a lot of things, it can be complicated. So if I go to categories, right now I can only choose 3 categories at this time because I always need another button to be able to go to the next and then to the next. So then it becomes a little cumbersome. Same thing if I wanted to pick a color, it takes a while to get to green. So that's a lot of steps for a lot of our students. Now, that we use quite a bit with our students is MultiChat 15. What we like about MultiChat 15 a lot is a lot of social language is pre-programmed into it. And the phrases are really chunky. So it already goes from I want, and now it's telling me I want to eat, to drink, to play. So again, a little bit of grammar, but it's helping them construct that sentence. So if I want to go to eat, and then it's bringing to me my categories, and to chicken nuggets. So that way, it's helping ease up that construction of a sentence. What I like about, again, when it comes to that social language, if we're talking about toys particularly, if I go to the bubbles, instead of just saying like, I want bubbles, it's taking me to, I want to blow bubbles. I want to do it again. I want high. I want low. I want big. I want little. Your turn, my turn. So it gives this nice social language that's already pre-programmed into it. Another page that we use quite often with our students is Word Power. Again, there's lots of versions of it. The lowest version is Word Power 20. And the nice thing again with this, it has some social language in there, but it also has a lot of grammar structure. So right now the word am isn't on here because it's not a high value word. We don't use it that often. But once we touch I, am is going to become one of our choices because it knows that I and am go together. Now at am, now they know that I am is present progressive. So now it's throwing in the ing endings for them. So it's already kind of helping them through that grammar without them having to think about it. So another one of the word powers that we use quite a bit with our students is that Word Power 60. Again, what's really great about it is if they can hit a button this small, it gives them lots of opportunities to have lots of language without having to navigate so many pages to get to what they need. So when we're going to groups, we've got lots of groups on there without having to add more pages. We can kind of use what's there. Now, I know that LAMP is very big into motor planning and using pathways, but TouchChat also has a lot of features with that as well. If you notice, you have the grammar being set up from left to right. So you have your pronouns first, then you have your action words in green, some of your extra smaller words in yellow. It kind of sets them up for how the grammar is going to be set up. But if you look at the page here about your main verbs, and if I go to play, and it's bringing me to toys, but if you notice where play is kept, that verb for play is in the same spot that is on the home page. Because again, they want that consistent, predictable locations for things. And the same thing if I was going to go to eat, and it brings me to food, but the verb eat is still in that same spot. So again, it keeps reinforcing that motor plan for our students. So in terms of the editing, when we go to get to a nice good blank page. Okay, so we go to menu, very simple, edit page. We want to edit the page. We want to change a button. All we do is touch the button, and it's going to give us some options. It can ask us if we want to edit the button, change its size, or remove it from the page, or copy it. So if I want to, say if I want to change that button size, instead of 1 by 1, I want it 2 by 2. And now we have a nice big button on that page. We wanted to do that. We want to edit the button to actually put something on there. The label is what it would be. So if I wanted to put, let's say, we want to put Barney in there because we know that's a song that a lot of our kids like to do. The message is what it would say. So it would say Barney. If you need an alternate pronunciation, you can put that in there too, because sometimes that text-to-speech doesn't always read accurately. And then you can either select an image from the library or you can import it from the camera. So you can always take real photos in here as well. So I find it's always easier just to go to the hourglass up there and a magnifying glass, take a picture, save, and now that picture is in here. So again, it's very intuitive. You just kind of like look through the list of what you need to do for each button. Now, when you're looking at the editing, there's a lot of other things on here as well. This is all different things like font and color backgrounds. You can kind of play with that as needed for students. Sometimes with like border width, I might make it thicker so it's a little bit, stands out a little bit more. And action, the default action is always speak message. But if you always want this button to go somewhere else to navigate, we can do that. There's lots of actions that can be added to any button. So those are all the actions a button can do. For the most part, the ones we're most concerned with is speaking and then also or navigating. All the other ones are interesting, but not necessarily necessary for most of our students. All of that good stuff. Okay, hide mode was something else we talked about. So if I go into edit page, and then there's a button called hide mode. Now, anything I touch at this point is going to get grayed out. It still exists, but once you're out of hide mode, the student can access the button. So that's really helpful, particularly if a student's perseverating on a button. Maybe we just hide it, give it a break for a little while, and then we can always revisit it without having to reprogram it all together. So let me get out of here. So now we're going to talk a little bit about LAMP. So let me just switch my page here. Okay, so the LAMP, again, pictures are a little funny. They're not what you necessarily would expect for things, but they do serve a really good purpose. And once you kind of get into why they do it the way they do, it does start to make a lot of sense. So let's talk about the menu and just looking at the corners. Vocab and menu, exactly the same like how TouchChat is set up. How I said that those menus are going to be the same. If I want to choose vocabulary, just like TouchChat, you're going to see the yellow locks and the green locks, just like TouchChat. So when it comes to the one hit, this is the only page they have access to. So if they touch like, it says like. If they say new, it'll say new. It's one touch and that's it. So that's good for starting them to get a little exposure to the words. Now transition is just that very beginning, exactly what it sounds like. We're starting to transition a word. So we touch work, and now it's starting to build in that navigation so they can start getting used to buttons going to another place off the springboard itself. And then finally we have the full version. And again, this is going to go to everything that you need. All 5,000 plus words are accessible through this main page. Now with it, again, buttons are a little weird, but let's just talk about the color coding on here. Color coding is going to be very similar to TouchChat as well. Your pronouns on the left side are all in yellow. Your main verbs are going to be in green. And then you have these colored in blue over here. They don't make sense because it says spelling and the. Again, the words on there aren't as necessarily as important as their locations. So let's just keep that in mind just for a second. First, we're going to start with the verbs. So you have that dark green as your main verb, and then you have its congregations on the side. So if I go to the word go, now we have the main green go is here, and then all the forms of go. Go, goes, going, went, gone. So, and if you're looking at it also, you can see why that bucket is starting to come into play. Bucket is about the present. So you have the present, you have a bucket, it's starting to tip over, that's your ing. It went, it's all gone. So now that's why those images are there for it. It's, again, a little hard to understand at first, but once you get used to it, it makes a lot more sense. And the same thing, if I go to the word come, it's in that location. If I go to the action for do, it's in that location. So your hand's almost automatically going there because it's so used to that motor plan. Now, going to those little blue boxes, that's going to be for your main adjectives. So if I go over here to the sneaker where it says fast, now I have fast, faster, fastest. If I go to another adjective, let me find another good one. So like, you have some things that are funny, funnier, and funniest. So there's a very specific reason why certain things are the way they are. All right, so lost my script. All right. So now in terms of programming, let me get to that page again that had some nice big open spaces. I go to menu, I can go to edit the page. And again, this is exactly like you would do in TouchChat. I can touch a button, create a button, and the same menus are now up. The label is the word on the top, the message is what it says, and then you would select an image or select one that's already in the system or import from the camera. So all of this is exactly the same in terms of how you would program it. The biggest thing with both TouchChat and with LAMP, we really don't want people moving things around from where they currently are. Because like I said, everything's kind of there for a reason. We can always add words to it, especially if we're talking about under my, which is all their personal information. You want to be able to put their own picture where it says, my name is Carrie, or I live in, and then be able to tell where they live. You want that personalized information to be able to go in there so you can edit those things. Same thing when we go to food. If there's a fruit on here that they eat but isn't on here, we can absolutely add it. Now, going back to the whole idea of that one location per word, if I want to say the word orange, that I want to eat an orange, I need to go to colors because that's where the word orange is. It's not going to be in both locations. It's just going to be in one location, and they happen to choose it with the colors. So if I want to say that I want to eat an orange, I would say like I want to eat and then go to the color page. Now, word find is going to be really, really helpful. In LAMP, you're going to find it under that main vocabulary. You're going to put in the word you're looking for. So if I want to find the word moon and hit find, it's going to tell me exactly how to get there. So I would touch this and it'll let me know. I go to get space moon. Wow. So looking at these words, again, think of this as that springboard. It's going to bounce you to where you need to go. The words in the springboard and the pictures are related, but they don't always kind of make sense at first. So for example, the word get is a sunrise. If you think about like, oh, I get up in the morning. But when you're getting to the vocabulary, the word get is there, but then it's also bringing to nature because the sunrise is about nature. So again, it's a little hard to think of it initially, but once you learn that motor pathway, it goes really, really quickly. Now, the other thing in here is that vocab builder, which is really, really helpful. You can make multiple lists. Like I made one up for circle time for a calendar. So I just load the file and I turn on the vocab builder and done. Now they only now have access to words that they need for calendar.
June.
Or the weather.
Weather.
Or the temperature outside.
Warm.
So this is a great way for them to train on where the words are located. And then as they get more proficient, we can add more and more words into the vocabulary. For some students, they may only have access to these vocab builder words and don't see the whole screen until they've gained that proficiency. And then when you're done with it, all you need to do is turn the vocab builder off, and then all those words come back. Now, just real briefly back to TouchChat about the word find that's in there, you would access it through the alphabet page. So wherever your alphabet page is, there's going to be word find, and you're going to have that same opportunity. So if I put in red and I do find, it's telling me all the locations I can find the word red. It's under colors, but it's also listed under their shape page. All right, so that is what the apps look like. I'm going to switch back over to the PowerPoint. Okay. So again, we went over touch chat, we went over LAMP. Now just some basic things about utilizing devices. So you want to make sure that it is out and available to them at all times. This doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be directly in front of them and that they're working on it every moment of the day, because if they're sitting by themselves and doing something solitary, this is meant for communication. So it's meant for them to be engaging with another person. So if they're not engaging with another person, it's okay for it to be, at the side of their desk, but maybe not directly in front of them. The biggest thing we don't want them to be this to become is a big stim for them. We don't want them just sitting there stimming on it all day, because they're not going to get that connection that this is something I used to communicate with another person. We want them to see that this is a point for them to connect with other people. But if they're just sitting on stimming on it all day, then they're not getting that connection. We never want their voice taken away, so we want them to be accessible to them, but it doesn't necessarily have to be right in front of them every moment, because we want to make sure that it doesn't become a toy for them. Now, if they are starting to stim on a particular button, there's two rules of thought when it comes to it. It depends on how long they've had the device. If they've only just had it for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month, and they're kind of messing around with the buttons, that's not the worst thing. We consider that babbling, because they're trying to figure out, well, what does this button do? How do I get from here to here? Like, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. If they've had a device for years and they're stimming on a button over and over again, we know that that's just them wanting to hear the sound, but they're not making a connection of them trying to communicate with another person. So if they are stimming on it and they're being inappropriate, we would do the same thing we would do if the student was verbal. If they were TV talking, we redirect them. If they're stimming on the device, we're going to redirect them. We can slide the device to the side, have them do hands down for a count of 5 or whatever it is that works for them, and then reintroduce it saying, okay, now tell me, what did you want to tell me? And make it so that it becomes functional again. When we're talking about those core words versus friend language a little bit, especially when it comes to LAMP, there was a study that was out that showed that 96.3% of the words spoken by the toddlers in the study were these words up here. And if you notice, there's not any nouns. There's pronouns, there's verbs, there's prepositions, but there's not colors, there's not community helpers, which are all great things for our students to work on. But in terms of communication, we want to make sure that they're getting most bang for their buck. They want to use the words that they're going to be most frequently used. It's really, really important for us to model. This device is a brand new language for these students. It's like trying to pick up German, trying to pick up Spanish for the first time. They need to be taught how to use it, so they need modeling. So by 18 months, most babies have received over 4,000 hours of spoken language, and we don't expect them to be fluent speakers. So we need to give them as much opportunities as possible, because if they're just using it during speech, it would take them decades to catch up to where that 18-month-old was in terms of language exposure. Some tips when it comes to modeling is don't worry about mistakes, because that's how you're going to learn where things are. So if you're moving things around and realize, oh, wait, that's not where I want to go, that's a great teaching opportunity for them and for you. And start small. Don't feel like you have to pick up the entire device and model every single word. Start small, 1 word, 2 words a day. Just help them build up that over time. Just as they're learning it, you're learning it. It might be hard to engage friends and peers since we don't have a lot of peer models in terms of verbal students with our nonverbal students, but we do have lots of students with devices. So we can have opportunities where 2 kids on devices can be modeling for each other. And don't expect a response. So we talk to babies without expecting them to respond to us. We have to kind of give them the same thing. So if they don't respond right away, then we model again, and then we model again. Sometimes it needs lots and lots of exposures for them to become fluent. In terms of printing out copies of the devices, that's where Chat Editor will come in. I do have lots of printed off versions of a lot of the devices, individual pages that we can put in binders. We also make sure that there is some type of backup, because devices do die. They come in dead sometimes. They do break. They need to go out for service. It's always good to have a printed copy available for the students. Again, stick to those keywords. We want to stick to the words that they're going to use lots and lots of times over and over again. And make it fun. If they see this as just one more academic test, they're not going to be engaged with it. Be silly with it. Do fun things with them. Try to get them excited, because it's got to be fun for them. We want them to experience that they understand that they can use this and people will understand them and be able to get their needs met and be able to be participants in their world. Okay, again, teach less, teach more, test less. So instead of just always saying, find the apple, show me the apple, say, oh, look, here's where the apple is. This is how you say it. Let me show you. This is really good also for the kids that are partially verbal, where they say something and you didn't quite understand what they said. It's like, I think you're saying this. Let me show you and see if they can confirm that that's what they were trying to say. Or ones that are partially verbal and they say something, it's like, oh, that's right, you did say that. I'll show you where it is on here too. Just so they know that if they ever can't find the words, they can always go back to it. They always have a reference for it and know where to find it. So this again calls those core words and ways that you can engage it and you use it throughout your day. So even something as simple as the word go, you can do it for requesting things. You can use it during transition when it's time to go home or go to the bus. When you're having wind-up times, where, oh, we're gonna make the toy go, we're gonna make the wagon go, we're gonna go on the slide, we're going down the slide. There's lots and lots of opportunities to use this one word and lots and lots of opportunities for them to have that exposure. Sure, I can request, but can I? I mean, we start requesting because that is very concrete. They ask for something, they get it, is very reinforcing. But we also want to think about the other things. What else can they be doing? We want to make sure that they can complain. For kids that wear braces, we want to let us know when something hurts so that we can help them. We want them to be able to ask questions. We don't want them to make them comment on their environment. Like if Macaroni the Clown shows up, we're like, oh, look at that. We want them to notice their environment. So we can't just stick to labeling and requesting. We need to give them a lot more options. Okay, now some general information about AAC. Don't feel like you need to start with a 4 or 8 button grid. Again, this goes back to that motor planning. So if we say, okay, well, we're going to start with the Go Talk 4. Okay, now we're going to do Go Talk 9. Oh, they did great. Let's go to Go Talk 20. Okay, that's great. Let's go to the next thing. Now, every time you did that, you've changed the motor plan on them. So if their bathroom button was on like the lower left corner, okay, now we're going to Go Talk 9. Well, now you change the motor plan. Now it's in a different spot. And go to the 20. Now it's in a different spot. You're reworking their motor plan every single time, as opposed to saying, what's the smallest button they can visually see and accurately touch? If the smallest button is on that Go Talk 20, but they can only do 4 buttons, well, let's do the 4 corners and start there. And then we can always add more words to it. And we're not retraining them on the motor plan for those first core words. You don't have to program new words into the device for every single new activity. Again, this keeps going back to focusing on core words. If you're only going to do a lesson on the plant cycle, we don't necessarily need to create a page just about the plant cycle, because those are words that they're not necessarily going to use over again or after the lesson's over or go back to. But you can have fringe language done on a low-tech word where they can point to it there and then incorporate some of their core words with a low-tech word. You can mix and match, and that's okay. You don't have to focus just on nouns for targeting requesting. Again, we want to go back to those core words. Nouns are great, but it's not the way most people speak. Students need something to talk about. If there's nothing interesting happening, what are they going to say? So we want to make sure that we're giving them opportunities of something to talk about. Students need to know that communication has value or they won't use it. This kind of goes back to my time back in Otisville with ABA, where everything was sanitized. Like every toy, everything was kept away in closets. And if a student wanted something, they had to go to a person and request it, whether they were requesting through sign or through a device or verbally. That person now became value because I need to use that person to communicate with them to get what I want. And now communication has value. So when communication has value, there's less prompt dependency, which we see so much with a lot of our students. And not to be afraid of wait time. If you're waiting for the student to initiate, give them that time, because when we keep jumping in to fill in that answer for them, that just increases that prompt dependency. And it's hard. Sometimes you have to wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It can be excruciating, but when they can start doing it independently, it's going to pay off in the long term. Students can use that combo of high tech and low tech depending on their situation. If going out on the playground is just not safe having their device for whatever reason, have that low tech version with them so they can still always have access to language. I had a student with a big eye gaze device and it didn't fit in the bathroom stall. So obviously we would take the device off, but have something low tech that she can look at in order to communicate while she was in the bathroom. All right, so talking about whether or not it's going to limit verbal output. We hear that a lot. Well, we don't want them to have a device because we want them to talk. We hear from parents, we hear from other staff. All the extensive evidence shows that AAC does not limit verbal output. It will always be easier to verbalize. If they have the ability, they will. On all the extensive research also shows that AAC can increase verbal output because it reduces their frustration barriers, and it can also give a consistent model. So it's words are being said in a consistent manner. It gives them more reinforcement that they're able to produce it on their own. However, this is not a panacea. Having a device will not eliminate autism. It will not eliminate behavioral problems. If a kid is taking their Chromebook and throwing it across the floor, giving them a communication device is not going to make them not throw things. And again, it can give them another weapon to throw. We need to look at all the situations of that student and how we can best support their communication. And sometimes going with something more low tech is more appropriate based on behavioral concerns or other things. So it's not going to eliminate what the problems are, but it is going to help ease some of those frustrations. It's going to ease some of those things that are impeding them from communicating. But just because there's a communication issue doesn't mean that the behavioral issues can go away. All right, having a device doesn't make you an effective communicator any more than a piano makes you a musician. You have to be taught, and that goes back to our modeling. We have to be teaching them how to use this communication. Just putting a device in front of them is not going to help them communicate. Okay, some brief information about evaluations. So both Newberg and Monroe Woodbury have their own AAC staff, and they will do their own evaluations. We can still put the request in that we want that evaluation to happen, but they will take it over from there. Funding is completely up to the parents, whether we go through district, whether they fund it privately by purchasing it themselves or going through their insurance company. And just another word about insurance. If going through insurance, the trial process, we're going to need more help from all the staff, whether it's paras, teachers, speech staff, OTs. The more data we can collect, the better off we're going to be. I'm going to go through what most of these companies want is a particular trial period, depending on the insurance. Some trial periods are 2 weeks, some are 4 weeks, some are even 3 months. It's whatever that insurance company decides they want their trial period to be. And almost all of them are going to expect to have pre-trial goals, like what do you hope the student to do, and by the end of the trial, did that student meet those pre-trial goals? So there's a lot of data that needs to go into this. We want to make sure that we're collecting this data. Just telling me, oh well, he did good with the device, is not going to be sufficient for these types of approvals. We need to know how often did they use it, what type of language are they using. If they're just labeling and requesting, a lot of these insurance companies and Medicaid will not purchase. They want to see that they're using it for greetings, that they're using it for commenting, that they're using it in a variety of locations and not just in speech. They want to see that how much prompting did you have to do? How much accuracy are they doing it? How independent are they doing it? All this stuff is, so just telling me, oh, he's doing good, he's appropriate, isn't enough. We need a lot more going through insurance. And a lot of districts now are really trying to advocate for the parents to go through insurance for a lot of reasons. Dealing with iPads in a district that doesn't have iPads in it generally is challenging from a management perspective. Also, there's no warranty with them if they purchase through the district or privately. Insurance gives warranty for when things break. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but it does require us to get a little bit more help from everybody else. So if I do have a student that is going to be going through Medicaid or insurance, you may see this form come to you. It looks overwhelming. It's not meant to be. It's meant to just be a prompt for you of thinking about, well, what kind of things are they doing? Even things like, can they carry the device on their own? Do they put it on the table? Do they turn it on when it goes to sleep? All those little things are helping us to justify to the insurance company that this is an appropriate device for a student. I'm going to stop that for a second. And what I'm going to show now, because we have a few minutes, I do want to show everybody a little bit about Chat Editor. I'm just going to pull that up. it goes. Okay. Okay. So the awesome thing about Chat Editor is that it mimics either of these devices, whether it's TouchChat or LAMP. You can have it mimic it on a computer desktop. When you use your mouse, it will activate it just as if you were touching it. It'll give you an opportunity, one, to be able to explore the devices when the device isn't with you. When it's with the student, you can kind of explore it on your own. This software is free. It can be downloaded from saltillo.com. You can have it on your home computer, and from there, you can edit it. You can change the words in here. So if I wanted to, instead of having juice, if I wanted to have apple juice instead, I can go into edit mode, edit the button. I can search for a different image. And it's going to give me a lot of my different juice options. So maybe I want to have an apple juice pouch instead. And I select that and OK. And now I've changed it so now I can print these off so they're accessible to the student. So something that's really amazing in this too is something called a capture. So when you put capture on, it's going to give you an additional window, which I don't think you guys can see from the sharing. But what it will let you do is anything you touch in Chat Editor will appear in this little capture window. And then you can copy and paste it into any Word document, which will allow you then to print it. So you can print off individual icons, you can print off sentence strips, you can print off pathways. So you can teach a student, well, if I want to find the word juice, they'll tell me like which buttons do I have to hit in which order to get there. So it's giving you those scripts. And here's where, again, where you're able to print off full pages so that you can have it accessible to the student for when they're not available. So if I go up to my little library, you'll see two things. You'll see my resources and English. English are the original vocabularies, and my resources are going to be the ones that you've copied and that you want to be able to edit. But through here, this one's set up right now for TouchChat. So again, I can pick up any of the ones we typically use, and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to touch it. You'll be able to put it up there. For classroom staff, if you have a smartboard, you'll be able to cast this onto your smartboard and engage with it just like you would on the desktop. And that way, maybe during circle time or during morning meeting, you can have their device on the board, the students with it, and you can basically do some major modeling for an entire group at one time. So it can be really beneficial that way. We can also just change the configuration. It'll take me a second to do that. Just reshare it. Okay. So initially when you see things, it'll be blank, but then all you have to do is go into your system, duplicate it, and be able to open it. And again, this way, especially with LAMP, because LAMP is so different than what we're used to, this gives you a really great opportunity when the students are around to just play with it and kind of see where things go and which words go to which places, and using that word find and be able to find out how to access it so that way you can be more fluent with your students. But all these pages, you can simply go to print pages, and then you will pop up. You make sure that you set it to do color printing because it defaults to black and white. You set it to color and to landscape, and you send it to our printers. And then that way you'll have this nice version of it accessible to the student as well. So that is Chat Editor. That is LAMP and TouchChat. I hope you find this beneficial. You know where I am if you have further questions, but the more you understand it, the more the student will understand it and the more successful they will be. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any further questions, you know how to find me. Have a great day.